unique bottles in your home. Okay. I shared on Thursday that Rasim Chazisel says that in this week's parsha we see how Hashem's in control, and that no matter what, meaning yesterday's parsha, no matter what we do, whatever Hashem wants to happen is going to happen. The brothers sold Yosef into slavery because he had a dream that he was going to rule over the brothers. And we see through what happened in the Parsha, it was exactly through that action that they did by selling him into slavery, that he went down to Egypt, that he became a servant to Potiphar, and then he went into jail and he interpreted the dreams, and it was through that he became the viceroy of Egypt, and then eventually that the brothers came down to Egypt and he literally ruled over them. So it was the action that they performed to try to prevent that from happening that made it happen. He says that's how Hashem runs the world. Whatever Hashem wants to happen is going to happen. We could do it could be the exact opposite we're trying to accomplish what Hashem wants to happen, but it could be through that exact opposite thing that we're doing that Hashem is going to make what happened happen. Okay, so I thought that was very related to what we're learning here. Page 122, chapter 4, Shaar Habitachon. V'Amar, Perish Hachelek Harishin Mehem. So we talked about there's 7 areas of life that a person should have trust in Hashem. Now he's going to go through each one. The first part, that is having faith in Hashem regarding matters of our body. Everything that has to do with our body, we need to have faith in God, we need to have trust in Hashem. What does that mean? A person's life, umoso, his death. How long a person is going to live is all dependent on Hashem. The years of his life are set by Hashem. Now you're going to ask, does that mean I don't have to exercise? If I could eat whatever I want and I could smoke, I'm going to live however Hashem wanted me to live anyway, so he's going to address that later. V'teref, mezono, l'mechyoso, the food and sustenance that he needs to make him live. Umabusho, his clothing. V'diraso, where he's going to live. Ubriuso, his health. V'chalyo, when he gets sick. Right? Some people are very healthy people, they don't get sick very often. Some people get sick very often. All that is dependent on Hashem, and there's nothing that we could do to change that. Umidaisav, his character traits. So here, on the bottom, he addresses, what does it mean, character traits? Aren't we supposed to spend our life changing our character traits? If we're by nature an angry person or a lazy person, I thought we're supposed to spend our life trying to change our character traits to become less lazy, less angry, all of these things. So what does he mean here that a person's character traits are dependent on Hashem? So I think he means here is that we're all born with different personalities, and we have different, call them in Hebrew netiyas, different leanings towards different personality things. There are certain people that are born, they get agitated very easily. There are certain people they're born, they get everything is easygoing for them. Now, both of those traits could have positive qualities and negative qualities. If a person is very easygoing, then he's probably not going to get angry at other people. But it could be also that maybe he's easygoing also, he doesn't take his Torah learning seriously because he's so chilled. So maybe it's not so good to be chilled in that area. The Gemara says that if a person, we know, the famous Gemara, that if a person is born under the siman, the astrological sign of Mars, that he's a bloodthirsty person, so he has that nature in him, but he can choose how to channel that nature through his life. He could be a robber, he could be a thief, or a murderer, or he could be a shochet, or he could be a moil. So he could direct that nature that Hashem gave to him in any way. Now it's very difficult, it's not so easy. In the Vilna Gaon in Mishlei, Chav Beis Vav, he cites that David HaMelech did 2 sins, and he was forgiven because by nature, King David had a nature that was very bloodthirsty, and he channeled that to fight wars of Hashem. So he had a nature that could very, very easily have gone to the evil side, but he was able to conquer it. Whereas King Shaul, he did 1 sin, and he lost the kingship. Why? Because King Shaul was born with a very positive nature. And it should have been very easy for him not to sin, and he went the other way, and he did a sin. So, but I think what he's saying here is that we're all built with a certain nature, and we can't control the way Hashem made us born with those traits. However, what we can do, and what our responsibility is that we should direct those traits to Hashem, and we could change them. It just takes we could soften them, we'll say. Change them, soften them, but that takes a lot of hard work. That takes a lifetime of practice. So, if somebody, you go into shul, and then some guy comes next to you, and there's a million seats available, and he decides to sit next to you, and then he starts, so that would get like a lot of people very angry. So, but if a person works on himself constantly, eventually, now how to work on that, it's a whole different discussion, but if a person works on himself constantly, then eventually it won't bother him anymore. So the idea is that we work on ourselves, we work on our midos. But I think what he's saying here is that Hashem gave us all different natures. And the Vilna Gaon in another place writes that the whole purpose of life is to break our midos, break those character traits that Hashem gave us that would direct us to evil. Okay. Now the proper attitude of bitachon, of trust in Hashem and all these things, to surrender oneself to God for whatever Hashem is, for whatever He's decreed. Asher gazer lo habari mehem, that He whatever He decreed. V'tiftach nafsho b'Elokim yizbarach, and a person should trust in Hashem. Ve'eda ki lo yigamer lo mehem elama shekatan b'das habor shehu hanachon le'inyana b'olam hazeh b'olam ba. And a person has to have the idea that whatever happens to him is what Hashem wants to happen to him, and what Hashem wants to happen to him is the very best possible thing in this world and the next world. V'yosef tov la'achris, and it's going to be better for him in the end. V'shan hagas habore lo b'kulan shavim. With all these things, it's the same. Elishim b'rei b'hem eitzav lo anhaga ela b'rishuso gzerosa v'dino. There is nothing that a person can do to change what Hashem has decreed. And just like a person can't change the day that he's going to die, and whether he has a healthy nature or a non-healthy nature, so too, a person can't change how much sustenance he's going to get, how much the clothing he's going to wear, and other aspects of his body. Now, once we determine that everything is dependent on Hashem's decree, and that Hashem has chosen the best for us, nevertheless, we are required to put in effort to achieve these things. This is what we call hishtadlus. When a person has to make the right decisions based on what he believes is the best. And Hashem, anyway, is going to fulfill His decree. So, we're saying that everything that happens to us, regarding our livelihoods, our lives, our health, it's all dependent on Hashem. However, the way Hashem made the world is that we have to put an effort to make those things happen. We have to get up and work for a living. We can't just daven for a money tree in our backyard. We do have to jog. We have to exercise, and we can't just eat fatty foods and smoke and expect that we're going to be healthy, because we're supposed to put in effort to make ourselves successful in life. Now, also, it's interesting. He writes here on the bottom, which is true, that even if we put in our efforts to achieve a certain outcome, it doesn't mean that Hashem is going to make the result coming from that outcome. I might have mentioned the story before that my Rosh Yeshiva had a Talmud. I might have mentioned it last week, but I just think it's a very appropriate story for this exact point. There's a certain guy, he had a student, or I don't know if it was a student or someone else he knew. He went to school for like 15 years to become some like specialized engineer, and that's what he really wanted to do for a living, and he wasn't sure if he should leave yeshiva to do it, but he left yeshiva to do it. And then after the first year he was working, some wealthy uncle died and left him with millions and millions of dollars that he never had to work. So this guy put in the effort to make a living, but his sustenance came from totally somewhere else. So many times we find that we put an effort to that something should happen, that we should achieve something, and it turns out the result comes from another place. So while the way Hashem made the world is that we have to put in our effort to achieve certain results, very often the results are going to come from a totally other place. Similar to this, so now we're going to talk about, he's going to mention more of this idea, we'll do I guess a couple more paragraphs, that the way Hashem made the world, even though the day how long we're going to live is determined by Hashem, that doesn't mean we can just engage in risky behaviors. Oh, Hashem said I'm going to live 120 years, so therefore I can go skydiving without a parachute. Right? Even though that Hashem set a certain amount of days that a person is going to live, nevertheless, a person still has to engage in activities to get himself food, water, clothing, shelter, based on what he needs. And he shouldn't place this on Hashem. If Hashem said I'm going to live for 120 years, I'm just never going to eat anything. Well, why do I need to work for a living to get food? Hashem said I'm going to live for 120 years. I'm not going to work. Also, another thing, a person can't put himself into risky situations and say, "Oh, I trust in Hashem. Right, I'm going to go take a selfie with a tiger in Six Flags in the safari and say, oh, I have trust in Hashem. Everything's going to be fine. The tiger's not going to eat me." You can't drink poison and say, "Oh yeah, I just drank some hemlock, but I trust in Hashem." Or you just go and start fighting with lions and tigers. To throw himself into fire. You can't walk into fire. Say, "We're fireman here." You see, when you go into a fire, you put in all sorts of special clothing to protect yourself. You don't just say, run into the fire like you are now in a vest. We don't do that. And we don't just run into the river. You can't say that Habitachon and put yourself in danger. Also, this is what the verse warned. Don't test Hashem like he tested him in Masa. Now, there are two reasons why we can't do this. What is the person? There are two reasons why a person can't put himself into danger. Oshiyamus, because there's two things that are going to happen. Oshiyamus, or he's going to die, and he'll be committing suicide. And when a person commits suicide, Hashem views it like he killed another person. He killed himself. It's like he killed another person. And it says in the Torah that you should not kill. Now, I think we'll leave the rest for next time, but he's going to say the other reason is because maybe Hashem will save the person, and when Hashem saves the person, he uses up a lot of his merits. Right? He uses up a lot of his zechusim if Hashem saves the person. Now, he brings a very nice story here on the bottom that we're talking about not putting yourself in a dangerous situation. That's when you have a choice, but sometimes you don't have a choice. So he tells a story here in World War II in Warsaw. The Brisker Rov was in Warsaw and there were bombs flying, and he didn't go into the bomb shelter. He stayed in the house. And the Brisker Rov said, based on the situation, it's not going to make any difference if we're in the bomb shelter or in the house. The bomb shelter, whatever it was, I guess the reality was the bomb shelter wasn't going to protect from those particular types of bombs. I can't imagine that back in the day they had such great bomb shelters. So he slept soundly in the bed. And he was fine. The family was fine. They were staying in the house here. It says they're staying in the house of Rav Yaakov Tansman. Rav Yaakov Tansman's daughter said after the bombing was over, she went on the roof. She saw on the roof there were unexploded bombs that hit the roof. So we're saying that if there was no choice there, he had nothing else to do. He's in a dangerous situation. In that case, you have bitachon. There's nothing else I can do here. Whether I go into the basement or whether I stay where I am, I'm in danger. However, if a person has a choice to flee, then he should flee, right? You don't put yourself into a dangerous situation. You don't go play with the lions and tigers. You don't run into the fire without protective garments. So Hashem made the world in such a way that we shouldn't do that. And he says if a person does put himself in those risky situations and he passes away, it's considered like he committed suicide. Right? So like these daredevils are. Don't be Rabbi Knievel, evil Knievel.
So which sports are considered dangerous?